Continuing here on the Exam Room Podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee with the weight loss champion Chuck Carroll, sitting across the table from Dr. Jim Loomis, fresh from a triathlon up in Lake Placid. Welcome back, my friend.
Thank you. Always great to be here.
It is my pleasure. I've been trying to get you back on the show forever. It seems to me like your stock is just on the rise right now. So you did the triathlon and obviously Game Changers. That documentary is about to come out. It's a heck of a time to be studying the correlation between plant-based diet and athletic performance.
It really is. And, having, one of my lifelong goals has always been to do an Ironman triathlon. And, being able to do that 2 weeks after my 60th birthday was, to me, it was almost miraculous. Being able to put into practice the things I talk about and the things to experience the things I hear from these really amazing professional Olympic athletes and be able to experience that myself as far as performance and recovery was really pretty amazing. And so that's the other reason, by the way, my training over the past 9 months has been pretty intense, and so didn't have a lot of free time over that time frame.
Yeah, no kidding. Let's talk about that triathlon in those 9 months, because it has been fascinating to follow you on social media. You were very active on Facebook, kind of posting your adventures.
Yeah.
So, for those who aren't familiar with triathlons, how many miles did you pedal, swim, run?
Yeah.
What's the total?
So I did a full Ironman in Lake Placid on July 28th, and that's a 2.4-mile swim, followed by a 112-mile bike, followed by a marathon, 26.2-mile run.
Oof.
And you have 17 hours to complete that total, and the clock starts when you jump in the water, and it finishes when you cross the finish line. And so that it includes the transition times between the swim and the bike and the run. And, I had one of my kind of bucket list things has always been to do an Ironman. I was a pretty competitive road runner in med school, a marathoner, 10K, ran track in college, middle distance. Kind of got away from it in the late 80s, got introduced to triathlon by a good friend down in Little Rock where I was at the time. And, kind of got into the sport, learned about Ironman, put it on the list, got married, had kids, kind of life got in the way. And as I think I've told on this show before, in 2010, hurt my knee, played with my dog, put on a ton of weight, got really unhealthy, saw forks over knives, got my health back over the summer of 2000, between the July of 2011 and the end of the year. So in January of 2012, I was able to exercise again. And in July of 2013, so almost 2 years to the day after I transitioned to a plant-based diet, I did a half Ironman in Muncie, Indiana. So that's a 1.2 mile swim, 56 mile bike, 13.1 mile run, and that really I thought was the limit of my physical capabilities, and I kind of checked it off the list and thought I was done. And in 2015, I moved here, and my training kind of drifted away. It wasn't quite as intense just because as we were getting BMC, Bernard Medical Center, ramped up. But as I started to contemplate turning 60 and what that meant, and this idea of an Ironman kind of resurfaced. And so I kind of bounced it off some friends because it's a huge time commitment from a training standpoint, which we'll talk about in a sec. But I started to bounce it off some friends. I talked to my friend Dotsie Bausch,
Olympic cyclist, right?
who I'd met through the Game Changers. We were in Boulder in an event for her Switch for Good project. And she introduced me to Joe Gambles, who's a professional triathlete who actually came in second place overall at Lake Placid when I was there and qualified for the World Championships in Kona.
Whoa.
And he encouraged me to do it and was kind enough to connect me with the folks at Quintana Roo, who I was able to get a really nice triathlon bike. And then I went to the International Plant-Based Nutrition Conference last year and, again, talked to some friends, and they said, you got to do it. And so October 1st last year, I signed up, and that day I started training. And I spent the first few months just kind of building base, I was getting up early, trying to work out twice a day, lift and bike one day, swim and run the next day, just kind of get my body used to the 2-a-day training. And then by March, the training really became intense, where we're talking 20 hours a week of training.
Yeah,
it was really all consuming. But working on nutrition and hydration strategies. And in May, I did a half Ironman in Chattanooga as a warm up, and that went quite well. And And then July 4th weekend, I went up to Lake Placid and trained on the course. And by then, I knew I could probably do this, and I did.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty amazing, long but an exhausting but exhilarating day. And it's interesting. So besides being bucket list, one of the reasons I wanted to do it was to really and truly show people that when we lead a healthy lifestyle, when we eat right, we exercise regularly, we control our stress, we get a good night's sleep, we don't drink too much alcohol, we don't smoke, we truly have the ability to decouple our chronologic age from our biologic age. And so, exercise in and of itself is an inflammatory event.
Yep.
So when we eat a standard American diet, which is, again, highly inflammatory, and we go exercise, we're lighting the fire afterwards.
Yep.
And so we get stiff and sore and such. And the remarkable thing, I was doing more exercise than I've ever dreamed I could do. On the week, toward the end on the weekends, I might go out and ride my bike 70, 80 miles, hop off the bike, run for an hour. It's 90 degrees outside, humid. The next day, I might go run for 18 miles, right?
Yep.
And I'm not sore, I'm not stiff, and I think a perfect example of how diet influences our performance. At the Chattanooga half Ironman, it was really hot there that day, and we hadn't had a lot of heat in the D.C. area in the early part of in the spring by then, and so it was a pretty tough race. And I finished in about 6.5 hours, which is not blazing fast, but pretty respectable.
Sure.
And you cross the finish line, and I'm pretty tired, and I go to the food tent, and what are they serving? They've got pizza. Cheese and pepperoni pizza. They've got cheeseburgers. Serious.
Yeah.
They've got chips. They had some fruit. They have some water and some soda, right? And some Gatorade. That's insane. So so now all of a sudden you've got this low burning fire, and now you've lit the fire through this intense amount of exercise, six plus hours of exercise, and then you're going to go throw gas on the fire when you eat these kind of foods after the race.
Yep.
And you see people the next day, they can't walk down the steps, right?
Yep.
And so I did a lot of research, and I concocted a kind of recovery drink I use. It's evidence-based.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now?
So I take tart cherry juice, which has been shown, Montgomery cherries have been shown to help reduce delayed onset muscle soreness.
Okay.
And I put in some kale and blueberries.
Okay.
I put in some beets. I put in frozen bananas to help replenish my glycogen for the carbs. I add some cinnamon and turmeric and ginger and a little black pepper, and then I put some chia seed. And so I had a big, huge, 64-ounce shake, waiting for me back at my transition area after the race. I went in, so I drank that right after. I had to drive 10 hours back to D.C. the next day and was on my bike doing 20 miles, 2 days after this half Ironman, and, running 8-9 miles a day or so after that without being sore and stiff at age 60. That is insane to me, right?
Absolutely.
That I could do that. And as I met through Game Changers in particular, when I started to talk to these incredible athletes, Olympic medalists and world champions and bodybuilders and weightlifters and, Patrick Babumia and one of the strongest men in the world, they all related the same story, that it's recovery, which was really where you get the advantage. Because when you're not hurt, you recover from injury faster. If you get hurt, you're less prone to injury, and you recover faster. So what that means is, you can hit it harder the next day, right? If you're in the weight room or, on a workout. Dotsie talks about this. And so to me, and being able to finally fully experience that, the impact it had on me. I mean, I went up top of Whiteface Mountain in Lake Placid.
Yeah, I saw those pictures too.
That was the day after the race.
Was it really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Man. So
it's crazy. I mean, it's just crazy.
Well, first of all, can we get that recipe to put that up on,
on the
website?
Yeah,
because I think it would be great to have Dr. Loomis's recovery shake up there. That's phenomenal.
That's great. Yeah.
And secondly, it just sounds delicious.
Yeah. And then the other thing I do, by the way, which really helped me, is I beet load, actually.
Oh, okay.
So beets have a very potent source of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide helps dilate the blood vessels, so it works to prevent endothelial dysfunction. So, and obviously we need lots of blood flow to our muscles when we're exercising at a high level like that. And there's evidence that loading with beets before an endurance event may in fact increase your endurance capacity by about 10%.
Wow.
So I I roast a bunch of beets and I put them in a blender with some lime juice and do a couple of shots the night before and a couple of shots the morning of. And whether or not it helps, I don't know. I think it helps, but there is evidence behind that. So I really took an evidence-based approach to my nutrition during the training.
Yeah, so what did a typical day look like as far as you with your diet while you were in training? I mean, how many calories were you consuming, and were you conscious about all of that?
I was conscious indirectly in that when I was hungry, I ate, and I was hungry a lot. When I was not hungry, I stopped eating.
Yeah.
I found myself grazing a lot during the day. Tons of fruit. I have a huge fruit bowl on my desk.
Nice.
In the morning, if I was really because my schedule was insane. Really, I mean, I was up at 4:35. I'd go swim, 1,500 to 3,500 meters in the morning, and then I would eat, and then I would come to work and work 12 hours, and then go home and run 5 or 6 miles. I typically run home, actually. Mm-hmm. And then the next morning I get up at the same time and then go lift weights and then work 12 hours, and then I go home and hit the indoor trainer, for an hour, ride 18, 20 miles on the trainer at night. And but my diet was what I eat most of the time. So it was based, whole grains, lots of beans and lentils for the protein, lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, green leafy vegetables. So my diet didn't change too much. And, again, I think that's one of the beauties of a plant-based diet. It's not the diet itself. If you want optimal health, optimal performance, you want to be compassionate for the animals, and you want to be conscious of the environment. The diet is exactly the same. It's just calories is the only difference.
So I think that the layperson that will be wondering from an athletic standpoint is, well, it doesn't sound like you made a conscious effort to really increase your protein intake either.
Right, and you don't have to. And the reason is, this is very interesting, right? So the natural macronutrient ratios of a whole food plant-based diet are about 75%, somewhere in there, 65-75% unprocessed carbohydrate, 15% plant-based protein, 10-15% fat. So the RDA for protein is about 0.9 grams per kilogram. Mm-hmm. If you're an endurance athlete, it goes up to about 1.2 to maybe 1.5. If you're a strength-trained athlete, maybe 1.5 to around 2.
Yeah.
Okay? So if you do the math backwards, if you're an average size person, 75 kilos, 80 kilos, and you do the math backwards, and you say you're eating 2,000 calories a day because you're reasonably active. Mm-hmm. Well, if you do that math, 15% of that, the calories is about 0.8, 0.9, right?
Yep.
Well, I'm not eating 2,000 calories. I'm eating 4,000 calories.
Right.
So how much protein am I getting?
Plenty.
Yeah, right. I'm getting 1.6, right?
Yeah.
Which is right where I need to be as an endurance athlete.
Yeah.
If you're a professional football player, you might be eating 5,000 calories. So where are you now? You're 1.8, 1.2, right where you need to be.
Yep.
So it's not protein you need to worry about, it's calories. And as long as you get enough calories, you're going to get enough protein.
You used to be the team internist for the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team.
Yes, sir.
And the St. Louis Rams before they moved to L.A. football team. How do you think, if you were plant-based at that time, how do you think the players at that time would have received the message of, you guys really might want to look at going plant-based?
I think they would have looked at me like I had a third eye. No, I really don't think they'd be very receptive. I mean, it's very interesting. There is so much bro science in the locker room and weight rooms, mm-hmm. Especially with more of on the strength train side. On the endurance side, there are many people talking people into adapting or understanding or learning about a plant-based diet for an endurance runner is really an easy sell.
Yeah.
Scott Jurek, Ritual, those guys have been doing it for a long time, and that's a message. Many of the top ultra marathoners and many of the top Ironman triathletes have moved plant-based. Strength train world, different story. And so where does their information come from? Well, it comes from the strength and conditioning coaches. It might come from the trainer. They come from each other, and it's very much based not in evidence, but in bro science, I call it.
Anecdotal.
Yeah, and you would go to the weight room in the Cardinal locker room. There would be literally blenders scattered around with big tubs of whey protein.
Oh yeah.
You would go to the pregame meals with the Rams when we would travel on the road. and you would go down for breakfast at 8 o'clock for a noon game, and there would be steak and chicken breast and pasta because you had to get your protein and your carbs, and it really was misguided. But that has changed, I think, nowadays, and especially after Game Changers comes out. I think you look at the Tennessee Titans, who are featured in Game Changers as well, and 2 years ago, I think 13 members of that team ended up going plant-based. It was started by Derek Morgan, began that kind of journey. And, he talks about how at first people were kind of making fun of him, and then as they see he's having this career year, leading the league in sacks, and, not getting injured, and he's not in the training room all the time, and he's able to recover faster, they're coming up to him, hey, what is it you're doing again? And next thing you know, his wife is actually a plant-based chef.
Yeah, Charity, she's been on the program.
Yeah, was, preparing meals for half the team. So I think that every day you read about another athlete who's gone plant-based, whether it be a professional football player, all across the sports world, NBA, on and on.
Yeah, and that's a conversation, like you said, across the sports world in many locker rooms. I tell the story all the time about a couple years ago going out to Ashburn, Virginia, where the team here in Washington trains, the NFL team. And I was speaking to a gentleman. It was the end of the season. It was week 16 or 17. Literally, they had one game left to play. And I'm interviewing DJ Swearinger. And everybody else in that locker room, you worked with the players, at the end of the season, they are walking around like it's The Walking Dead, like it's horrible. And here's DJ just bounding down the stairs like nothing happened. Like you the morning after the triathlon, where everybody else just can barely move their legs. And here he is just fresh as possibly could be.
Yeah.
And it's because he's not eating the dairy, the meat, all of those inflammation things,
That's exactly right.
And it kind of makes me wonder, it's like, well, DJ's a starter, he's a Pro Bowler, and why aren't more people looking to it? And I think part of it still is kind of that stigma surrounding it, which is
right.
It's getting chiseled away now, but that bro science it's a tough thing to beat.
Right. And that is in fact the exact reason that James Wilkes started the Game Changers project. It was really and truly, because he was in that, he was a mixed martial arts fighter in that kind of bro science, meat-driven world. And when he got injured, started to look around and say, what's going to help me recover the fastest? And discovered that the Roman gladiators, some of the original mixed martial artists, if you will, were plant-based. And he couldn't believe it because, no one had ever told him that. And as he started to kind of peel back the layers of the onion and look around, discovered the science and all these amazing athletes. And so I think Game Changers, again, as I said earlier, people come to plant-based nutrition I came to it for my health.
Yeah.
Traditionally, veganism's come through compassion. Increasingly, there's interest. There's been a lot of stuff with the fires in the Amazon here recently about the environmental impact of our foodways. And I think the last door that's going to open is going to be performance. And I think Game Changers really and truly is going to be the film that changes the game because it presents such a compelling argument, evidence-based argument for the performance and health and the environment. That touches on the environment as well, benefits of a whole food plant-based diet. And I think the kind of the hardest group to change are the younger men, because they are ingrained. We've been told by society that men eat meat and you can't be manly unless you eat a lot of meat, and you can't get big and strong. And so trying to dispel those myths, I've seen the film a few times now, and it is it is astoundingly good.
So you just watched that, and maybe you still have another question. Good news. We've got doctors, we've got dietitians, we've got experts with all the information that you need to succeed. All you need to do right now is subscribe to the channel below.